This video help, what we're going to do is we're going to be covering the customer information screen. This is the first screen in what we call the back end of the application. As you recall from the previous information that was provided on the calendar and on the appointment screen, those screens have a direct relationship to the customer screen. For example, there is a property showing tab. These tabs, when you click on them, open the information. And this is the one where on the front screen we started out explaining that the appointment on the showing is on this side and the property actually being shown on this side. And if you wanted to, on the back end of the application, you can click on this icon and it will display the portal record for this particular listing. And that's true of any one of the listings in the portal. And of course, you can have as many listings as you want for this customer. In this case, the customer is Mary and John Smith. And what we're looking at here is that the appointments or whatever is on this screen is related to those folks. And if you look at the side over here, you can see that Mary Smith is listed here. And I pointed out before, you can put them in first name or last name as you want. But you should also put them up here as what they are in plain English as far as Mary and John Smith if they're a couple. And in this case, the primary contact is the person that you would be contacting first. If it were not John, it would be Mary, and in this case it shows that it is Mary. Their address information is their property address, and over here is the actual showing that's being shown. And as we stated before on the calendar, this is the people that are getting shown the property, and this is showing notes, likes, dislikes about the property, and the status, which is put on here, that can be changed here. Now, all the changes that you make here will be updated on the appointment screen for the appointments, and also be the history of all these showings on that screen, because you can scroll through these to see them all. The same thing goes for the activity track, the meeting track, and the action track that we already covered. Let's go back to the customer screen. Now, the one difference on this screen is that the information that you saw on the front screen includes what's called a related contact. A related contact includes the primary person, which is shown here, and then any additional people. In this case, it would be both it says Paul Webb and Mary Smith would be on here. And Paul Webb is a seller agent in this case, and this is the seller. So this is the seller's agent that we're looking at here, and then Mr. and Mrs. Smith up at the top. There would be the phone information, the cell phone, and email. Now at the end of the record, if you click on this, it's going to open up the portal where there's a large area where you can add text and information. And this is where you would see the birthday and the anniversary inputs for these people. And also you could put a picture of the person in there if you wanted to. It depends on if they want to or not. They have their contact address, contact information, and all the other information coming from the front of the screen, so it's easy to define who this person is. And then in the portal record, you see the portal items that are lined up right here, so you can see the information for this particular record. The one I clicked on was the seller's agent. So their information is here. If you needed more information put in about the seller's agent, you could put it in here. And then down at the very bottom of the screen, you have the envelope return. And this is something, if you're sending anything by envelope, a number 10 envelope, this would be the return address for whoever is sending it out. And then when you click on this, it will show you the screen with the envelope, and you can print an envelope in your printer. If you insert it in, and it has the information for the return address and the actual information for the person above, so that it will show up on the envelope. And we can pop over there real quick to see that, and there you go. In this particular case, there's the information, and of course up here you'd replace this in the other screen we just came from with the return address. And then you can go ahead and set up your printer and print the envelope. Let's go back to the customer screen. On the customer screen, now that we return, and you can see how easy that is to navigate over there. I'm going to actually change records because there's a little bit more on this record. I'm going to go ahead and show you that we do have a Status, I'm going to go back to the tabs in a second, but we have a status up here. In this case, we're writing a listing at this particular point. It could be a new client, or we're doing scheduling a showing, and the showing is done, or we write the customer off, meaning that the customer is no longer going to be interested in anything we have. There is a present offer, and then there's a signed offer, need follow-up, schedule an escrow, schedule an inspection for the customer to go through and inspect the house to make sure that everything is taken care of before they make an offer. Inspection complete, inspection sent, and this is for when you schedule a inspection company to come in, if that's the case prior to them making an offer. And then closing escrow is in the process. If you need to do a follow-up, or a sale is made or no sale, you indicate that when the record has completed everything above. The next thing we want to look at, and this is not included on the calendar side, but it is an additional thing, if you want to find a location for a person who's a client that you're going out to make a sale to, or you're going to visit their house for a meeting, this will give you the map to their location. And also there is Google Maps as an alternative. If you like to use Google, it'll pop up the web browser and give you the Google map. And this gives you, if you want to, you can get directions and then copy and paste the directions into the prior screen. I would suggest you put that into a UDF file called Directions to Home. That way you have that in the UDFs both on the calendar side and on the back end of the application. The next thing we're going to cover is the customer track, and this is the one where I have the picture of the client. In this case, I just put my own picture in there, but it has the information for the client, and then the sales track, what kind they are. They're a seller. They were first contacted on August 30th. The property type that they're looking for would be a narrative where they're looking for something like a 2-bedroom, blah, 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 blah. And this is the same information that you see showing up on the calendar appointment side. So whatever you edit out on the calendar, it'll show up here on that particular client. Plus the UDF screens that we showed you on the calendar, on the appointment side, this is the same exact information back here. So if you edit it here, it'll also edit in all the calendars where this client is involved. So there's a chain back and forth between the different appointments and the actual customer information. The main reason why we have these in the actual application on the back end of the application is that you can do finds on all the data, and you would do it on the individual record in the UDF by using the drop-down menu and going to that portal. But you can do searches here where you cannot do that in the calendar. You can't leave the screen for the appointment and come to this screen without going back to the main calendar and then coming over here, and that's important to know that, because that is what is called a modal window, and it has to be closed and saved before you can leave the calendar and go to any other part of the application. That's why it doesn't have an app map on that particular appointment screen. But yet you have all the access to all the information you see here. For example, the property showing, which we covered a little bit ago, the active activity track, where you actually show the date, the time, and the location, and it automatically puts in the current record number and then the actual narrative that you put in. Now the big difference on this side of the application is that when you click on the activity portal, this one will actually open up to that page that you can print for the activity portal, where you can have the narrative here of what you had for the activity. What's kind of nice about this, and you can imagine this, if you're making a call to a client and you're online with them on the phone and you want to go ahead and take notes as you're talking to them, it's not considered a meeting, but these are notes that you did with an activity, which was a call. Or you could say, for example, as you're doing this, you might come up with an action item where, say, you have to send them a brochure. Well, if they requested one, or they want pricing or some kind of data sheet or MLS or MRLS listing information, you could easily send that to them either by email, or you could send it as an actual paper document. Or you could take and put it into here and send it as information from this actual page, because this page can be printed. And this also on the iPad can be used as a send document. You can either send it as a PDF, or you can actually click on the screen and then go ahead on the iPad and go to the gear up on FM Go, click the gear and say print, and it'll know to print this area on all the forms that we have in this screen or these screens. Let's go back over to the, by the way, it does have a delete here. The delete is not necessarily required unless you have done something where you've created a child record by adding a new record in here, and it was not supposed to be added, and it won't have a record ID to it. You have to delete orphaned child records by deleting them, and that's why I leave the delete button in there, and that's the only purpose for it. Let's go back into the customer screen. We have the activity track and then the meeting track. In this case, you can get an example, which we didn't have in the front, where we have an agenda of items that we're going to be doing. We have the seller and the buyer. In this case, I'm using the general context in the seller and agent, where the actual name would be in there. You could go ahead and click in, and the seller would be whatever seller, either me or in the other case of the other record, it'd be one of the two Smiths or both of them that were at the meeting. And then the meeting notes. These would be face-to-face meetings with the client, and this could be either at a general meeting where you're just talking about buying property, or it could be, say, something like at a title company, escrow company, a lawyer, or whatever, where you're actually going to be a part of a meeting with those people, where you would take notes and make sure that you have all the CRM information that you want to add to the record, so that you have a complete background on everything that's happening. It's very important to keep detailed notes. If there's ever a hiccup or an issue or something that was either not understood or was misunderstood, this would be where you would come back to read your notes to make sure that what you said and what you put on the information for the note and meetings was correct, and you have a backup that tells you what you actually said. One of the main reasons for a CRM is to make sure that you do keep your what we call ducks in a row, so that you do have all the information that's required, time, date, location, and information that backs up everything that you're discussing with a client or managing with a client. The last one is the action item, as we discussed a little earlier. You can go ahead and put the action date, whatever you're doing for the action name, the actual start date of when it's actually supposed to start as far as an occurrence, and also the completed status, if it's complete, or whatever the current status is, and the date that it was finished. 4-day evolution for this one to be done, and it was a thing where we're actually doing mortgage paperwork for escrow preview for the client, and that's the kind of thing. Now, obviously, this would show up on the appointment side of the screen as all the items that are actually addressed as far as action items, and you can create action items just like you do appointments, so that they are on the calendar and you can find them and go in and read about them. But the nice part of this is that everything would be in there. All the action items, all the action activity tracks, and all the meetings. So you can go as you're looking at the calendar, or you can come to the back end of the application and go through them here. As with the activity track, this one has a record that you can print or email if you need to. And let's go back to customer. And then the same thing for the all these items here. Now, property showing, one of the main things is it's the next screen we're going to go to as far as property listing, but property showing requires a property listing before you can actually show properties. So there's another kind of a person that you would be putting in here. If you have a seller in this particular case and they're listing a property they're moving out of and they're listing it with you, then you need to create the property listing for that person. In addition, the same person could be a buyer, seller. So it could be one or both. If they're going to stay with you and buy a property and they're also listing their old property with you, then you would have a buyer-seller situation. Well, how do you do that? I looked in here and I don't have a buyer-seller. Well, if I click on this, I can go in and I can create a buyer-seller. I would go to the top up here and I would put in B-U-Y-E-R and then seller. And then I would have that added. As soon as I click off it, you'll see that they're now a buyer seller. And you can add any type of thing that you need to in here. There could be a builder, like we have in some cases where a builder is the listing person. So they could be a builder seller. So you could add that in there as well. And we go ahead and click this. And when you come back out now, you'll see that on the listing for the type of seller, now we have buyer seller in there. So in this case, let's just say they're a buyer seller, and you can see that it actually enters in the record that way. So there are several of these that are sometimes added to an application. Typically, or not typically, it would always be where there's a drop-down list. The other reason for having the drop-down list and a linking thing is that you can edit the scroller. If you only had an iPad app, you would not be able to edit and put those into the list, where on the application now on the iPad, if you use this link to go to the type of client, then you could put in the additional ones that you needed to. The customer statuses we already covered, but there is a status where, for example, if it's a follow-up and you're doing something, then you would use the calendar here and put in the follow-up. Now there is a report where you're going to see the follow-up as far as the information for the follow-up for something that's coming due for this particular client. And you would do that as far as it's in the listing here. You would have a portal record where you would have the, it would be on the list view or we'll cover that later. At any rate, there is additional fields here, for example, like the spouse's employer and phone at work. And the notes that you see here are the same ones that show up on the calendar appointment, and they come back over here. Now this pretty well covers everything. I just want to cover the last thing down here. This is license information. When you purchase the application, you're going to get a license and a license number and a copyright notice. This application is only provided to you under license. You have no rights to distribute, give it to anybody, sell it, or anything that takes the license and voids it when you do something that you're not supposed to. This particular application is licensed, and it can be licensed for a multi-user application as well, where you do have more than one person using it, but only under license. If you have any questions or you see something that I didn't answer, you can contact me on the website on targetsolutions.biz. At the application, you would click on the FAQ support center, and there you could, on the right hand side of that page, there's a place to put your email and ask your questions and email those to me, and that gets directly to me by email. If you have any other issues, please contact us through that support site and that particular field. Thank you.